Modern humans can gain 5 pounds because a delivery app remembered our address. An Ice Age hunter had to chase dinner across a frozen landscape, avoid becoming dinner, and somehow still find the energy to carve voluptuous little statues out of stone. That creates a strange question. Did ancient humans ever actually get fat? Not healthy winter weight. Not the mammoth hunt was cancelled. Truly obese. The obvious answer seems to be no. Prehistoric life was physically demanding. Food was unreliable, and nobody had invented cheese fries. But human bodies are exceptionally good at storing fat, and archaeologists keep finding ancient images of people with enormous bellies, heavy breasts, and thick thighs. Were these portraits, fantasies, fertility symbols, or the Paleolithic equivalent of editing your profile picture? The truth is more complicated than cavemen were lean. To understand it, we have to go back before farming, before cities, and before anyone could order dessert without first locating a beehive. Before anyone could become fat, evolution first had to build an animal capable of storing enough energy to make fat useful. That animal was us. Compared with most primates, humans are unusually committed to body fat. Even lean people carry more of it than a chimpanzee, which is impressive because chimpanzees spend far less time arguing with vending machines. Human infants are especially fatty. A newborn arrives with a brain that consumes an absurd amount of energy and a body equipped with backup fuel because evolution does not trust the catering schedule. That reserve matters because humans are expensive creatures to operate. Our brains burn a large share of our daily energy. Pregnancy is costly. Breastfeeding is costly. Childhood is long, helpless, and apparently designed to prevent adults from sleeping. Add infection, injury, cold weather, failed hunts, and seasonal shortages, and stored fat begins to look less like a cosmetic problem and more like prehistoric insurance. But insurance only works if the body knows when to save. Our metabolism evolved in environments where food abundance was often temporary. When calories appeared, especially calorie-dense fat and carbohydrates, eating beyond immediate needs could be adaptive. The body converted part of that surplus into adipose tissue, then released it later when dinner failed to cooperate. This does not mean ancient humans were biologically destined to become obese. It means they possessed the machinery. Appetite, reward, insulin, fat cells, and hormonal signals such as leptin formed a system designed to balance energy intake against survival. The problem is that this system was not engineered by a committee preparing for supermarkets. It was assembled under conditions where sweetness usually meant ripe fruit or honey, animal fat was valuable, and overeating opportunities arrived like surprise festivals rather than Tuesday. There was also no single prehistoric lifestyle. Human groups lived in rainforests, grasslands, deserts, mountains, and Arctic environments. Some relied heavily on game, others on plants, shellfish, tubers, nuts, fish, or whatever could be persuaded to stop moving. Their bodies faced different seasons and different nutritional risks. A hunter enduring winter scarcity did not experience the same energy landscape as a coastal forager surrounded by shellfish. So the prerequisite for ancient obesity was never simply laziness. It was the combination of a fat-storing primate, a temporary calorie surplus, and enough stability for that surplus to last. Evolution supplied the storage system millions of years before civilization supplied the pantry. The battery was ready. It had evolved for emergencies, not aesthetics, and certainly not for a future in which snacks could be purchased beside the gasoline. What ancient humans needed next was a charger. Ancient humans did not need agriculture to discover a calorie surplus. Nature occasionally delivered one in spectacular, badly organized bursts. A successful hunt could produce far more meat than a small group could eat immediately, especially if the animal was large. But the most valuable prize was often not the lean muscle modern fitness influencers photographed beside rice. It was fat. Bone marrow, organ tissue, and fatty deposits packed far more energy into each bite, and humans became remarkably skilled at extracting them. A cracked long bone was basically prehistoric packaging. Difficult to open. Worth the effort. Cooking made the situation even better. Heat softened food, reduced chewing time, improved digestibility, and allowed humans to obtain more usable energy from the same ingredients. Tubers became easier to process, meat became easier to chew, starches became more available. Fire did not create calories, but it helped humans collect them with less digestive paperwork. Then there was honey. Wild honey is one of nature's most concentrated sources of sugar, which explains why human beings will climb trees, invade bee colonies, and accept multiple stings for something that now comes in a plastic bear. Many modern foraging societies prize honey intensely, and ancient humans probably did too. A large find could provide a sudden flood of energy that required almost no preparation beyond persuading thousands of angry insects to reconsider their property rights. Seasonal abundance mattered as well. Fruit ripened, nuts dropped, fish migrated, shellfish gathered in dense coastal beds. Herds moved through predictable landscapes. For brief periods, a group might encounter more food than it could use immediately. Eating heavily during those windows would not have been irrational. It would have been excellent planning performed by a brain with no calendar. Food sharing could extend those surpluses. Humans are cooperative feeders. Hunters returned with resources that were distributed among relatives and allies, while plant foods and gathered items circulated through the group. Sharing reduced the risk of starvation when one person failed, but it could also concentrate food during successful periods. A feast was not necessarily ceremonial at first. Sometimes the carcass was simply enormous. Could those episodes make someone visibly fat? Temporarily, yes. Repeated access to calorie-rich foods could increase body fat, especially in people who were less active because of age, injury, pregnancy, social role, or unusually favorable circumstances. But sustained obesity requires sustained surplus, and that was the difficult part. Food spoiled. Seasons changed. Animals moved. People moved after them. So prehistoric weight gain was probably less like a permanent lifestyle and more like a fluctuating account balance. Abundance arrived, the body deposited energy, scarcity returned, and the savings were withdrawn. Ancient humans had discovered the binge. They had not yet invented the subscription. Here is the archaeological problem with ancient body fat. It has terrible preservation habits. Bones survive, teeth survive, stone tools survive, fat does not. Unless a body is frozen, dried, waterlogged, or preserved under unusually generous conditions, the soft tissue disappears and leaves archaeologists staring at a skeleton that refuses to discuss its former waistline. A skeleton can reveal height, sex estimates, age, injury, disease, nutritional stress, and patterns of physical activity. Thickened bone and strong muscle attachments may suggest repeated labor. Joint wear may hint at years of walking, lifting, squatting, climbing, or performing the prehistoric activity known as everything. But none of this gives us a reliable body mass index. A broad skeleton could have supported muscle, fat, both, or simply a naturally large frame. Teeth offer another partial clue. Cavities, heavy wear, and dental disease can reveal changes in diet, especially after people began consuming more starchy foods. But a cavity proves that bacteria enjoyed your lunch. It does not prove that you were obese. Even preserved human remains rarely solve the mystery. Famous frozen or naturally mummified bodies often come from harsh environments, unusual deaths, or later farming societies. They are valuable biological snapshots, but they are not a random survey of humanity. Archaeology does not preserve an evenly selected sample. It preserves whoever had the extraordinary bad luck to die somewhere chemically interesting. This is why the so-called Venus figurines attract so much attention. Across parts of Ice Age Europe, people carved small female figures with exaggerated breasts, abdomens, hips, buttocks, and thighs. The Venus of Willendorf, made more than 25,000 years ago, is the celebrity of the group, faceless, carefully carved, and built like someone had asked limestone to represent maximum nutritional confidence. At first glance, these objects seem like obvious proof that some Paleolithic women were very large. But an image is not a medical record. Artists exaggerate. Symbols distort. Religious objects rarely care about anatomical averages. A figurine might represent pregnancy, fertility, maturity, abundance, survival, sexuality, ancestry, status, or an ideal body that most people did not possess. And the figurines are not all alike. Some are slender, some are abstract, some emphasize breasts, others hips, others the abdomen, and some barely resemble a human body at all. Treating them as photographs would be like using superhero comics to calculate the average shoulder width of 21st century men. So the oldest archaeological evidence does not give us a preserved Paleolithic person with confirmed obesity. It gives us something more frustrating and, honestly, more interesting. Repeated images of bodies carrying substantial fat, created by people who clearly thought those bodies mattered. The question is no longer whether prehistoric artists understood fatness. They did. The question is what they believed it meant. The Venus figurines have spent more than a century being interpreted by people who are very confident about objects made by people we cannot interview. Early scholars often treated them as fertility symbols, mother goddesses, or prehistoric pornography, which tells us almost as much about early scholars as it does about the Ice Age. The nickname Venus was itself a modern joke, comparing these ancient figures to the Roman goddess of beauty. The artist who made them never called them that. They also left no labels, no instruction manual, and absolutely no customer reviews. One possibility is that some figurines portrayed real women with high levels of body fat. That is biologically possible. Human bodies could gain substantial weight whenever food, health, genetics, age, pregnancy, mobility, and social circumstances aligned. A rare individual might have been memorable enough to represent. But possible is not the same as common, and a carved figure cannot tell us how many people look that way. Another hypothesis connects the exaggerated bodies to pregnancy and reproduction. Large breasts, expanded abdomens, and broad hips could emphasize motherhood or fertility rather than obesity. Yet some figures appear too stylized to represent a specific stage of pregnancy, and not all of them show the same features. Prehistoric artists were apparently just as unwilling as modern artists to follow one consistent brand guide. The figures may also represent survival during extreme cold. In Ice Age Europe, stored body fat would have offered both energy and insulation. Some researchers have argued that figurines from regions closer to advancing glaciers tend to display greater body volume, suggesting that fuller bodies symbolized health and endurance during periods of climatic stress. It is an intriguing pattern. It is not a signed confession from the Paleolithic. Then there is the self-representation theory. A woman looking down at her own body would see a foreshortened view, breasts and abdomen appearing large, legs narrowing below, and the face almost invisible. Some figurines share that perspective. Perhaps they were made by women depicting themselves without mirrors. Clever, plausible, still debated. Other scholars emphasize ritual, ancestry, initiation, sexuality, teaching, identity, or social memory. And these explanations are not mutually exclusive. A single figure could have carried different meanings to different people, just as a modern wedding ring can represent love, law, family, wealth, tradition, and the fact that someone spent 3 months pretending to know about diamonds. The safest conclusion is also the least dramatic. We do not know exactly what the figurines meant. We know Ice Age people deliberately exaggerated certain bodily features. We know they repeated those choices across wide areas and long periods. We know fatness, pregnancy, sexuality, nourishment, or some combination of them had symbolic power. That does not prove ancient obesity was widespread. It proves the human body had already become an idea. For most hunter-gatherers, gaining body fat depended on temporary abundance. Agriculture changed the schedule. Once communities began cultivating grains and storing harvests, calories no longer had to be eaten immediately or chased across the horizon with a spear. Wheat, barley, millet, rice, and other crops could be dried, collected, guarded, taxed, inherited, stolen, and converted into the first truly dangerous food technology: leftovers. This did not instantly make early farmers fat. In fact, many agricultural populations experienced poorer nutrition, more infectious disease, and heavier workloads than the foragers who came before them. Farming produced more food overall, but it also produced larger populations, social inequality, crop failures, and the exciting discovery that one person could own the grain while everyone else carried it. Still, storage created something prehistoric mobile life rarely offered: the possibility of repeated surplus in one place. Livestock added milk, blood, meat, and animal fat. Grinding stones transformed tough seeds into flour. Cooking vessels turned grains into porridge, stews, and beer. Fermentation made calories safer to store, easier to digest, and considerably more entertaining. A village with a successful harvest could now consume energy-dense food for months rather than days. But those calories were not distributed equally. As settlements grew into towns and states, food became political. Rulers controlled granaries. Priests received offerings. Warriors collected tribute. Administrators managed supplies while avoiding many of the tasks that burned them. For the first time, a small group of people could enjoy reliable access to food while others performed the physical labor required to produce it. That is the social environment in which sustained fatness becomes more plausible and more visible. In many early societies, a larger body could signal that someone was protected from scarcity and manual work. It might suggest wealth, authority, fertility, maturity, divine favor, or simply excellent connections. When most people feared hunger, carrying extra weight was not evidence of personal failure. It was evidence that famine had been temporarily denied access to your calendar. Feasting strengthened this connection. Communities used enormous meals to mark marriages, funerals, alliances, religious ceremonies, harvests, and political agreements. Hosts gained prestige by giving away food. Guests created obligations by accepting it. A banquet could nourish the body, honor the gods, settle a dispute, and quietly remind everyone who owned the largest storage building. Food had become social currency. Body size could now carry social meaning because surplus itself carried social meaning. Fat was no longer only an emergency reserve accumulated during a lucky season. Under the right conditions, it could reflect rank, profession, age, gender, health, and access to resources. This was not yet modern obesity on a population-wide scale. Most people still worked hard, endured shortages, and lived with disease. But civilization had assembled the necessary ingredients: stable food production, concentrated calories, sedentary roles, unequal distribution, and cultural admiration for abundance. The fat-storing body had finally met the calorie-storing society, and society immediately put someone in charge of the pantry. So, did ancient humans ever get fat? Almost certainly, some did. Human biology was fully capable of producing large bodies long before farming, cities, or processed food. A person with repeated access to calorie-dense resources, reduced mobility, favorable genetics, pregnancy-related changes, age, illness, or an unusually protected social position could have accumulated substantial body fat. What ancient people probably did not experience very often was obesity as a widespread, permanent population-level condition. The environment kept interrupting it. Food availability changed with seasons. Hunting failed. Plants stopped producing. Groups moved. Infections raised energy demands. Winters consumed stored reserves. A body might gain weight during abundance and lose it during scarcity, sometimes repeatedly. Prehistoric fatness was likely real but unstable. Modern life removed many of those interruptions. The human appetite still responds enthusiastically to sugar, fat, salt, variety, and convenience because those signals once pointed toward valuable resources. Our bodies still store excess energy because tomorrow might be disastrous. The problem is that tomorrow now contains another supermarket. This is sometimes described as an evolutionary mismatch. Ancient biological systems operating in an environment they were never shaped to manage. But that phrase can sound as though evolution made a mistake. It did not. Evolution solved an old problem brilliantly. The old problem was starvation. A person who ate eagerly during abundance and stored energy efficiently had a better chance of surviving shortages, recovering from illness, supporting pregnancy, and feeding a metabolically expensive brain. Those traits did not evolve to produce beach bodies. They evolved to keep bodies alive. Today, industrial food systems can deliver dense calories continuously, cheaply, and with almost no physical effort. Stress can disrupt sleep and appetite. Medications, genetics, income, neighborhood design, work schedules, and access to healthcare all influence body weight. Reducing obesity to laziness is not science. It is a moral story pretending to be biology. Ancient humans were not universally thin because they possessed superior discipline. Most simply lived in worlds that made sustained surplus difficult. The Venus figurines remain silent. They may show real bodies, imagined bodies, sacred bodies, pregnant bodies, or bodies designed to mock every future archaeologist personally. But they remind us that humans were thinking about flesh, nourishment, reproduction, and survival tens of thousands of years ago. Our relationship with body fat is not a modern failure. It is an ancient survival strategy trapped in extraordinary success. Evolution built a famine machine. Then we parked it beside a drive-thru.